Is there a speech, a line that speaks to you to this day from West
I
Wing?
know it's a lot of material, but is there one in particular?
My very first line, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have false gods before me. That was my entrance. You
It's a
know,
good entrance.
Prepare your ears, humans. Happy, sad, confused begins now.
Hey guys, it's Josh. Welcome to Happy, Sad, Confused. Really cool one today. A legend. Someone that's been doing it a long, long time and has always delivered. Martin Sheen is on the podcast. Martin Sheen, Apocalypse Now, Badlands, The West Wing. Truly an honor to have him on the podcast for the first time. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you, as always, for checking us out on YouTube or Spotify or however you're enjoying the podcast. A little backstory on this, because this is a fun, interesting backstory. Just worlds colliding in a strange, bizarre way. If you follow the podcast, you follow my work, maybe you know. A few months back, I got the opportunity to host a reunion for the Breakfast Club. This was the first time the cast had reunited, particularly with Emilio. Emilio had not seen them in decades. And what I learned for that live event, and you can look this up online, was Emilio really, without tooting my own horn, decided to do that event in part because he wanted to talk to me on the podcast. And we recorded a great episode. We got tons of great feedback on that one. Check that one out too. That has led me to get to know the Estevez clan. What a privilege. Truly. Like I know, Emilio, got to know a little bit since that conversation and talked to a couple of his siblings, talked to Martin, and Martin now has a podcast. And he references it here, so I'll reference it in the preamble. I did talk to Martin and the family a little bit as they were he was putting his podcast together, just because I've been doing it a while and they were looking for some advice, guidance, and I gave them the little that I have, having been in the podcast game for a while. So, yeah, wow. Like growing up watching Martin Sheen's work and Charlie's and Emilio's, and to, I don't know them now in this capacity is one of the blessings, one of the unexpected blessings of being in this business and, I don't know, sticking around a while. So that's kind of the preamble. So I was very well aware that Martin Sheen was going to do this podcast for a while, and now it's here. And I highly recommend it. It is called the Martin Sheen Podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. And it's kind of exactly what you want from a Martin Sheen podcast. These are very well-crafted 20-minute episodes that are mixtures of poetry and stories and conversations, and all told in that very unique Martin Sheen timbre, that voice that is so recognizable. He's a reassuring voice in these unsteady times, and a man who I have a lot of admiration for as not only an artist but as a human being. If you look up his activism and the way he's kind of stood up for causes that I generally agree with, he has walked the walk, talked the talk over his long, amazing life. So really privileged that I got a chance to have this conversation with him about a lot of things. Before we get to that, quick reminder, as always, patreon.com. I have to say it, patreon.com/happy sad confused. Early access, discount codes, live events. We've got Brendan Fraser coming up very soon, November 18th at 92nd Street Y. Tickets are still available, but it's selling fast. Get in on that. And yeah, as I always say, supporting us over there helps us make more over here. This is one of those things we spent over an hour, Martin and I, talking, but still it's like just scratching the surface. How can you cover his career? But we do get to, in addition to, of course, talking about the podcast, some of the greatest hits of Martin Sheen, including Badlands and Apocalypse Now and The West Wing. And I wanted to talk to him about Wall Street, working with Charlie on that. Even a little bit of Spider-Man talk, The Departed. So I think you get your money's worth in this. And like I said, one of those that's a real privilege to spend some quality time with someone that's made a big, a big impact in the world, in the artistic world, and just as an activist. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with the one and only Martin Sheen, everybody.
I am so pleased as punch to have the one and only, the legend that is Mr. Martin Sheen on my podcast to promote the Martin Sheen podcast. There's symmetry for you. Martin, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Josh. I'm delighted.
As you know, I've had the privilege. I feel like I know like half the family, 2/3 of the family. I've gotten to know a lot of you in recent months. Emilio and I had a great chat a few months back. So, and what I just want to say about that is, it's not lost on me like that, what a privilege it is. I grew up with your films and Emilio and Charlie's, but also to see the family is so strong and there's so much love and connection between all of you. And that's a testament to what you and Janet have done. So I don't know, just kudos all around, I guess.
Well, I guess we're projecting a pretty good image.
You are. You are. So first, before we get to the podcast, I'm curious, when you're out in the world, you get Martin, but I would imagine sometimes you get Ramon or Mr. President. Do you get Mr. President or Ramon more in your daily life?
I get them an equal portion, I guess. Yeah, Mr. President, particularly since 47 Second Coming
Yes.
has been pretty frequent. You know, a lot of people say, like Mr. Clinton used to say whenever I'd see him, "You're still my president, Martin."
Well, there is a kind of a burden there too, because as you well know, and we can get to this a little bit later on, but like your image is so fused with some of the roles you've played, in particular Jed Bartlett, that like people I'm sure project upon you, this larger than life mystique. I don't know, does that ever feel like a burden that like you have to almost live up to people's ideal of who you are?
Oh, no. It's pure fantasy. I mean, we worked in a sort of parallel universe to the real White House when we began in 1999, and the show ran through 2006. So we started in a Democratic administration, but the majority of our uh, uh, years on the air were with the Republican, with the second George Bush. So uh, I was often asked if Bartlett were a Republican, would I have done it? And without hesitation, I said, as long as Aaron Sorkin wrote it, of course I would. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and he would have ridden the hell out of it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then on the Ramon side, I know I've talked about this a lot, but I'm just curious. I mean, like you've been very frank, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a bit of regret that like you didn't get to live your professional life with that name, but it was a different time, obviously, when you were coming up. I'm sure you've reconciled that long ago, but like I'm curious, like I don't know where you're at with that name change, and did your father ever come to terms with that, or was it an issue for him that you had changed your name professionally?
It did. It did bother him. He didn't express it as such, but I remember he came to New York um, and spent a couple of days with us and came to see my show. I was on Broadway at the time in a show called The Subject Was Roses. And I saw him looking at the marquee, and he did not recognize the name. He never said anything, but I knew from his, the look on his face and so forth. Um, Officially, I've never changed my name. I'm
Right.
still Ramon Gerard Antonio Esteves,
Yeah.
and I love my name. I just arrived at a time and a place where it was hard enough to get a job as an actor when I started in 1959 in New York City. To have a surname, a Hispanic surname at that time, was not an advantage because, unfortunately, there was great prejudice in the city
Right.
against Puerto Ricans, the Puerto Rican community. Of course, they were American citizens by birth. They still are. But they were the newest immigrants, so-called, at the time, and they were taking the blame for all of the problems with the city at that time. So I identified with the community, and I was very proud to be a part of them, but it was in name only.
Yeah.
So I kept my name, but I realized I had to kind of step outside and be kind of more anonymous in terms of nationality at that time. Yeah, I regret it deeply. And I remember when, my children started to come into the profession and they were deciding whether or not to use the Estevez or to change it. And Emilio was on the verge of changing the last name. We're just using, Emilio Sheen, and then he saw it in print. And he knew this just doesn't fit.
Right.
So and then I frankly I begged him to keep it. I said, it's one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't keep my name. And I said, we're going into a new millennium, and Hispanic people in our country, and particularly in the state of California, are going to be, uh, you know, almost in the majority. And so I said, I think that the reverse is happening for you that I had to deal with.
Right.
The Hispanic population is well ingrained in the community and speaks with its own voice very proudly and
Yeah.
distinctly. And you're going to be a part of that. And I hope in some way it had an influence on him, but he made his own decision and to
Right.
keep Emilio. And I was very proud of him. I still am.
The new podcast is fantastic. I want to give it some love. I got a chance to sneak a peek at it. By the time people will be able to see or watch or listen to this, at least one or two episodes will have been out. And it is purely Martin Sheen. It reflects so much of you and your passions in different ways. I've heard you talk before. I don't know if this was an influence. There's definitely a bit of the Garrison Keillor storytelling behind this. Was that something on your mind when you kind of decided what a Martin Sheen podcast would even be?
Very much so. Garrison Keillor is one of my heroes. I think he's one of the best storytellers in American history. And I had the privilege of doing, I guess, 8 or 9 episodes of Prairie Home Companion. So I got to know him personally. In fact, I did one show in his home base in Minnesota,
Yeah.
and he was in the oh gosh, the famous authors' names of the theater was his home base. F.
Oh,
Scott Fitzgerald, the
sure.
Fitzgerald Theater. And I was in my dressing room the night that we were going to go on the air, and I was singing my favorite hymn. And there was a knock on the door, and I said, "Come in." And it was Garrison. He said, "What are you singing?" I said, "That's my favorite hymn." And what's it called? I said, "It's called How Can I Keep From Singing?" Well, you're going to sing that on the air tonight. Oh my God, no! Yes, you will. I'll get with what's his name, and we'll make sure you're in the right key. But you're on for tonight. So, what could I do? Garrison Keillor was asking me to sing on Prairie Home Companion. I'd never sung publicly anywhere, and and so okay, I worked with the orchestra leader, and he said I had the right key, and so I did it. And it was the first time I ever sung in public, and it was on that show. So yeah,
Can we
thanks to
expect
Garrison.
any singing on this podcast, or strictly poetry,
They
storytelling?
cut it out. They have a section. I did the day are our engineer and Renee our producer, and sometimes they just get to talking, and I forget that he's recording everything, and so now it's called the open mic, and so you have me talking about a lot of things, but the majority, 99% of the show is scripted. The
Yes.
poems, of course, but all the stories I've written myself, they're all personal. They're all biographical, and there's some of the stories I've never told before. So, but I was raised on the radio. I love the radio because you had to use your imagination. All those characters we were hearing uh, in the series, during school nights we were allowed to stay up late to hear our favorite programs, and but on the weekends, we got uh, free time, particularly Sunday night with Jack Benny and
Sure.
Ookla and Ollie and all those wonderful shows. And so that was ingrained in me because it's like reading a book. It's a personal experience. And so when I decided to do the podcast, I made that a clear aspect of it that I would tell a story, but the audience would know that there was a beginning, a middle, and the end, and that it was personal. In some cases, it's deeply personal. I believe that's the only way to do it because if something's not personal, it's impersonal, and who cares?
Yeah.
So, at least I cared, and I hope that our audience will. But Garrison Keillor, yeah, one of my I would say Garrison had without knowing, I've never spoken to him about it. He doesn't even know about the podcast. I hope he knows I'm bragging about him now. But yeah, he had a profound effect on me. I was a longtime fan of Prairie Home Companion. I remember one time on the set of The West Wing, I was doing an impersonation of him. I was just between takes, and Allison Janney said, "God forgive me, Allison." She knows. She said, "But that's pretty good. Impersonation of Garrison." And I said, "How would you know?" She said, "I've been doing the show for 2 years." She would do the show. She'd fly out to Minneapolis. She was in New York at that time and do the show and go back home. And it was like, oh my God. And when I learned that, I peppered her with questions about, and the one thing I wanted to know was, did they have a script ahead of time for Lake Wobegon? She
Right.
said, "Are you kidding?" No, nobody knew ever what he was going to do. And they would just give him a couple of rattles on the piano when it got, time to wrap it up. They never knew where he was going. He didn't either. And it was so personal. And yet you saw how absolutely brilliant it was, and we hung on every word.
Yeah.
And he was that kind of storyteller, but he had the mind of a poet, and he had an imagination that just inspired me. And yes, when I started doing the podcast, I thought, boy, if I can get people to listen to our program the way I listened to Prairie Home Companion and Garrison Keillor, why, I thought that would have been a great achievement. So we'll
Well,
see. Yeah.
no, I mean you're speaking my language. I like my parents are of your generation, and I will always remember my dad. And this probably made an impact because radio was my first love, and podcasting arguably is radio essentially. Was like listening on car trips to his tapes of like The Shadow and Green Hornet and all of that. And there's something that can't be replaced from just like yes, your imagination meeting the voice of someone iconic that can really tell a tale, and you certainly can. Um, I'm curious. I mean, look, we're at a very fraught, fragile, crazy time in the world, and I think your voice is a steadying. It's something that we really is a comfort for a lot of us, and I think that's part of this too. Is part of the mission statement of this. I don't know. Is it tied to where we're at in the world right now, and I don't know, providing comfort for others?
Well, I don't know how it's going to land, if it's going to land. I can't tell.
Yeah.
We're going to know, I guess, soon enough. Um, but yeah, Renee was trying to get me to identify myself in the podcast. We did some ads, and she wrote some copy for me to record, which I did, and I would make adjustments here and there. But she said that I really should make it clear that I'm going to bring that same person that I can never separate myself from,
Right.
that would have an opinion about things, and hopefully would have some measure of encouragement, or at least acknowledgement that we are in very, very scary times. And if I could just be a, a, some, some kind of echo that says, this is only fleeting. We have to be aware of one another. We are here to walk each other home. Don't leave anybody out. Um, don't accept the opposition's term for enemy. We do not accept enemies. The greatest enemy I have is me. The only person I've ever been able to influence is myself. I don't have any illusions about that. no matter what issue I was involved in or whenever I went to a demonstration, I never anticipated I'd make any difference, whether the protest was against nuclear weapons or against a specific war or an issue, homelessness or housing, whatever the issues are. They're all intertwined. You can't separate one issue
Sure.
from another. It's all about social justice and people's rights and freedoms and people's uh, how should I say responsibility. We have a responsibility. We didn't get 250 years of freedom come next year by accident. A lot of people sacrificed a lot, including their lives over the last 2.5 centuries, and so it's worth fighting for. And we're getting to a place now where clearly it's not hard to see where these people are going. The militarization on the pretext of, this city is burning up and is
Right.
consumed by crime and so forth. It's a lot of crap, and we know that, and we have to state that, and we have to be present to the people that in those cities, like right now, it's Portland and Chicago, and right here in LA, of course, and many more to come. And it's clear to any of us as old as I am where this guy is headed. We read How Hitler Won, a
Yeah.
very interesting book by Corey Taylor, incidentally, that I did the preface for. And yeah, these guys, man, they must have read that book because they got it down. And the way they're starting with setting us up, and the military is a big part of that. So we're going to get used to military presence in our streets on an everyday occurrence. And it's like when you have to move the cow indoors in a harsh winter, you got to get used to his presence in your house. Otherwise, you don't have a cow. And so that's the image. But by next year's election, there are going to be troops on the ground, and they're going to have a very strong presence at the ballot box, and
Of
we'll never
course.
know, some of the outcomes. So yeah, there's a lot at stake. It's called fascism, and there's no other word that describes it in the shortest possible from here to there straight line. It's fascism. It's
Yeah.
authoritarianism. It's something that we've seen it before, and we've seen it, in many other foreign countries. First time we've seen it get this far in this country with this bunch, but we've got to call it what it is.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, I think that it is, as you say, it's the gall of doing it in plain sight. It's like there's nothing subtle about what has been happening the last bunch of years, and it is about vigilance and about calling it out and not accepting these sacrifices of our liberties. It's calling it out every single step of the way, or else we're going to lose everything.
exactly, and we have to continually be reminded that our rights are not given by the gracious hand of any state, but they must be protected therein. And that's
Yep.
uh, uh, our favorite, one of our favorite patriots from the Revolutionary War, Thomas Paine. You know,
So, this is a film and TV podcast. This is a podcast that celebrates actors and filmmakers. So you're gonna have to indulge me, sir. We're gonna do a little bit of greatest hits of your amazing career. I have to ask you some questions because when do I get nearly an hour with Martin Sheen? It doesn't happen that very often. But if you'll indulge me a little bit, so the beginnings of your acting career, from what I gather, it's a lot of theater work in the 60s. It's a lot of TV guest spots. It's here in my hometown in New York. You're here. And you also overlap a bit, as I understand it, with another great, Mr. Al Pacino. Is that fair to say you kind of came up together? I know he always talks about Charles Laughton as his mentor. Was he also a part of your life as well?
very much so. Yeah, in fact, we devote a whole chapter of our podcast to Charlie Lawton's poetry. Yeah, and Al figures in that because Al had his poems published just kind of privately, and I, had a copy of that that Charlie gave me because he wrote a poem called Emilio, which is one of my favorite poems, and I recite it as well in the podcast. But yeah, Charlie had a profound effect, and his wife Penny Allen, who was a brilliant actress. They're both gone now, God rest them. But their daughter has been very helpful in us getting the rights to use his poetry. And yeah, Al and I came up together. Yeah, um, we were, how shall I say, starving young artists. Yeah, we're about the same age and the same temperament. He's a New Yorker, of course,
Right.
and I'm a Buckeye, so we had different backgrounds, but we had the same kind of passion. I remember in the day, we were all there was a kind of a clique. It was Charlie and Penny and Janet and I and Matt Clark and Johnny Darren and a few others. The crowd of actors and artists. All of us were kind of equally paired. No one had a nickel between us. We were all we delivered furniture together. We delivered newspapers together. We hung out together. We got drunk together. We were a very close group. It was like family. And I remember one time Janet had seen Al in a play that I had not seen. It's called Hello Out There. And she said, "Do you realize that he is going to be a major star?" And we were all kind of looking. He said, and forgive me, an hour we will know what I mean. I mean it with the greatest love. We said, "You mean Little Al?" Because that's what we
Oh,
call him, Little Al, affectionately.
sure.
And she said, "You bet." And oh my God, what did she see that we didn't? We just saw this wonderful young man, so full and vibrant, and he was very funny. He had a great sense of humor, and was like a stand-up comic. But I adored him. I still do. He's one of my heroes.
He tells a,
And
if you'll indulge me, he tells a really lovely story in his memoir about you, about when he was struggling and you were doing all right in the theater. And he says that you kind of got him a gig as, I guess, an understudy or a background player in one of your plays. And he only learned later that you were paying him out of your own pocket simply to help Al out when he was not doing as well as you. Is that your
sorry, he
recollection
found
as
out
well?
about that. I don't remember that, but he shouldn't have. I shouldn't have let him know that. Yeah, no, he did understudy me, and he was going through a very difficult period. He was homeless. He was literally sleeping in a friend's bathtub, literally. And I was off the streets by then, and I was doing a play, and I ran into him one day, and Al had this great energy. He was always upbeat. You rarely ever, in fact, the only time you would ever see Al uh, in any other dimension was when he was acting. If he was acting and he was depressed, yeah, or he was angry or joyful, whatever it was, his spirit was so full. But off stage, he was very dear and sweet and very funny and endearing. And you could go anywhere with him at any time. One of the best times I ever had with him was we worked together as ushers in the Cinema 1 and 2 up on Upper Third Avenue, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And we had in those days you had to wear a tuxedo
Right.
and you carried a flashlight.
Flashlight. Yep.
And when you would deliver people to their seats, what number is that, sir? Follow me, please. Here we go, and be quiet, please, and that sort of thing. We did that for, God, I can't remember. I can't. It was, I don't know, several years. I was living in Staten Island at the time. Remember, I used to come in, and we would meet down in the wardroom and get ready and with all these stories. And during our time there, one of the big hits was playing, and it was the only theater in New York that had Tom Jones. And so a lot of celebrities were coming in. And so we got to march him down the aisle. Albert Finney came in one day and we pretended
Wow.
that we didn't know who he was. "Oh, can we help you, sir?" "Yes, right this." We take him down. And other celebrities, I remember Walter Winchell came in one night,
Oh, wow.
and I was given to take him to his seat. So I mean, it was just a very wonderful time,
Yeah.
and we didn't think about housing or food or haircuts or wardrobe or
You were in it
any
for
of
the love
those
of the game.
superfluous things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was always, if you weren't suffering you weren't doing it right, you know.
Right, right,
And so, and then I came, many years later. One of my favorite phrases is from well, two characters really. Dostoevsky once said this most mysterious quote: my greatest fear is that I would not be worthy of my suffering." That starts you to go inside a little bit. And then a century later, Viktor Frankl said it after he survived Auschwitz for 3.5 years. And he said uh, that we had to learn to be worthy of our suffering. And that's how they survived at Auschwitz, because they realized that they had to create community, that you couldn't do it on your own. You had to and I don't know if you've read his book. It's one of my favorite books, and it had a profound effect on me. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And there were like three editions of it, and he added to it as he got older. He died, he was close to 100 years old. It wasn't that long ago he passed away. But that book had a profound effect on me. And he talked about how you do things and you don't tell anybody. You do them because you cannot not do them and be who you are or who you're meant to be.
right,
You're part of something bigger. And he talked about at Auschwitz, now they always knew when somebody was fading away. And often they would curl up in the bunk, and the lads would come along, now, come along, and they'd pull his legs and his arms, and they'd stand him up, and they'd lead him out. In the
wow,
work detail, they were in the brick buildings, the form, the place. Auschwitz was two prisons actually. There was the one prison where the workers lived and would live, survived, uh, and then there was the second one, Birkenau, which was
right,
a mile or so away, and that's where the ovens were.
yeah,
But these people were kept as long as they could stand up and work. They were worth something, and that's where Frankel was, and that's where Elie Wiesel was,
right.
and Frank was there for a while.
It's
And so,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
the profoundness of yeah, the what humans can rise to in these kind of circumstances and taking
yeah,
care of each other. It goes back to what you were saying about
yeah,
what we all have to do, which is
yeah.
look out for each other.
Yeah, we're
Um,
here. We're here to walk each other home. If you're
yes,
looking for, a fundamental basic reason for living, start with that.
yeah, it's a good one.
We are here to walk each other home. You know.
The first film of yours I want to bring up is of course Terrence Malick's Badlands. Which, I mean, he wasn't Terrence Malick back then. People might forget. This was his first feature, as I understand it. Did you? I mean, in retrospect, you know what a singular talent he was. At the time on set, was it obvious like this is as much a poet as a filmmaker?
Oh yeah, you use the phrase too, because my friend Matt Clark called him a screen poet when he saw Badlands, and that's the best description I've ever heard of Terrence Malick's talent. Yeah, he is a screen poet, and he sees through. And people, I remember when we were doing Badlands, it was a very limited budget,
Yeah,
and we had the summer of 1972 in La Junta, Colorado. And as we were going on, the crew began to diminish because it was kind of base salary, and it was going on for a while, and a lot of the crew didn't understand what he was doing because it was nothing, that you've seen before.
yeah,
Uh, and you just had to have faith. I knew what he was up to. I adored him. I knew that I would I st if you want to know how I came to into his realm, it's kind of a funny story. Do you have time for the?
please. I'm here
Okay.
all day.
All right.
I'm here for you.
I got an invitation. One day I got a call to go to this hotel on Franklin Avenue in Hollywood to audition for a haberdashery, for a pair of trousers, to model a pair of trousers, and it would
Right.
be a still photography. I was much younger and thinner at that time, and so I came to this hotel and I modeled the trousers for these people, and they said thank you very much, And I left the hotel, and as I got out on the sidewalk, I was walking down, just the street, and a lady at a window and from the hotel on the first floor is pounding on the window, saying, telling me to come back in. It was Diane Durfner. She was a casting director for Terrence Malick. I didn't know who Terrence Malick was. I'd heard of Diane Durfner, so I knew she had a great reputation for being a casting director. So she called me back in, and she said, "Look, I'm casting this film, and the director is out of town, and I've mentioned you to him, but he says you're too old and you're just not right for the part. But I think you are, and I'd like to do a little audition here on tape." She had a little camera, like we used to have in the old days, little black and white video camera. And would you do that? Now I'll show it to him when he gets back. I said, sure, why not? So she gave me a couple of sides, a couple of scenes. I went out on the street and I walked up and down. As I'm reading him, I thought, this seemed very familiar. And I was right. I came back in and I said, would this in any is this related to Charlie Starkweather and
Right.
the killer out in Nebraska? Well, she says it is, but he's not doing the real story. But yeah, it's sort of you could say that it's kind of based on that story. Oh, I said I remember that very well. And so I did this little audition with just, she's behind the camera and I'm reading the lines, but it's just like we're doing here. It's just this. And you can't move the camera or yourself. You got to stay there because you're only lit for that
Right.
place. And I forgot all about it. And weeks later, I got a call from Terrence Malick. Oh, he says, could you come in and I'd like to meet with you? And I said, okay, fine. He was living up in Hollywood Hills at the time, and he had a huge dog named Obibalink, and he's the dog that appears in the film that that gets shot.
Oh no.
That's the dog. He didn't get shot. No,
Of
no.
course, of course.
But
Yeah.
yeah. But I was terrified of him. I'm terrified of all dogs that I don't know. And so I was reluctant to come in the house when I saw the dog. I mean, he was standing up. He was still here. But he was lovely. For any rate, Terrence was very shy and very um, lovely man. And I was struck by him. I thought, wow, I've never met a filmmaker like this before. I mean, he's really different and and
Yeah.
and and really intelligent and sincere and very funny and disarming, and a young guy. It was the first time I'd worked with a director that was younger than me. I was
Right.
32 at the time. At any rate, I would come back every couple of weeks through the spring of that year, 1972, and I would do auditions. And I met this little redhead girl from Texas. The script called for a little a teenage girl from Texas who was red haired and she knew how to twirl a baton. And this was Sissy Spacek was from Texas, red hair, knew how to twirl a baton, and she happened to be a brilliant actress. And so she and I started doing scenes from the movie, the script, but I'd never read the full script yet. And finally, one day, Terry called me. I was doing a show at Paramount, and he said, "Could you come by on your way home and pick up the script?" And I said, "Okay, fine." So I was just okay, fine, didn't no big deal. I went up to the house. He gave me the script, and he said, "I want you to do this part." I said, "Oh, okay, fine." And I didn't realize what he'd said or what I was being offered until the next morning when I got up at about 4:35 in the morning and I was driving back to Paramount because I had some more work to do on this series, a guest spot on this series. And I remember I was listening to Bob Dylan's record that had the one of my favorites of his songs that no one knows, but Desolation Row.
Okay.
And the sun was coming up and I was going along PCH and I realized that I had just been offered the best role of my life. And I didn't know if it would make any difference career-wise, but I knew it would make a tremendous difference to me because I'd never had the opportunity to show
Yeah.
until then what I knew I was capable of. And I had a little small orange car. I don't know, I think it was a Mazda. And I pulled off the side of the road. And I remember I just broke down in tears and started weeping with joy and relief that finally I was going to get a chance to do something that was relevant in my life and in cinema, and it was Terrence Malick, and it turned out,
Amazing.
and I never had the slightest doubt uh, working with him. I adored him, and he was so funny and disarming. I remember he would be directing a scene, just normal. Oh, Martin, it's kind of the way he talks. Oh, Martin, you go over here and sissy, you do this and you do that. And then he'd look at his hands, say, "Oh yeah," he had written notes on his hands. He didn't have any paper handy. He'd always write notes on his hands, on his arms, everywhere. And then he'd give you the note. So, well, now I want you to do this, and maybe you could do that. And Martin, you do that. Okay, now do just throw that away. And he'd say, he would do it. He was just,
No
I
one like him.
adored him. And then
Amazing.
we became great friends. And I'm sorry, I'm such a windbag now, but that was one of the most important moments in my life was meeting that man, doing that film at that time.
Of course.
And we were very close friends. And then um, he had some trouble in his personal life. He went through a divorce. He moved overseas. He was living in Paris. I didn't know it at the time. And I was going here and there. And we got back together. I had a break from Apocalypse, and he actually was in a scene in Apocalypse that was cut very early
Oh,
on.
okay.
And so I was doing the film, and he was having trouble um, making Days of Heaven.
Right.
It's another brilliant film, and he wanted a certain actor, couldn't get him, and he had to, you know, he had to be satisfied with another actor who turned out to be just brilliant. All of
Richard
them,
Gere. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Richard Gere,
Yeah.
and so his big concern was would he be able to begin the film and include the fire because you can only burn up a certain amount of acreage, so he had to get permission for that and had to be controlled, and so he was in a place called Moose Jaw in Canada, and uh, and so he was getting ready to do that. He was off to that, and I was off to the Philippines, and I didn't see him again for a couple of years. I was in Paris in 1981 doing a film, and I just returned from India, and I was going through a very uh, kind of tumultuous time, and I knew that I was approaching a very uh, important uh, level. I
Yeah.
was kind of a do or die. I was on the verge of something. I wasn't quite sure what, but I knew I had to make a decision. And I'm walking down the street. I was staying in a little hotel on the West Bank. Is that right? No, not in Paris. It's I can't remember which. But at any rate, it's
Yeah.
the where where all where all the best pastries are and the oldest.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, and I'm walking on the Rue Jacob, and I see this guy coming towards me, and he's looking at me, and he's saying, "Is that you, Martin?" And I'm saying, "Is that you, Terry?" Yeah, and we reacquainted, and I spent practically every waking hour when I wasn't on the set with Terry. He taught me Paris on foot, on the underground, and the city became very important to me as he did. And he led me. He became and I've said this and it embarrasses him, but I'll have to say it again because it's true. He became a spiritual director for me. And he knew that I was going through something that I couldn't quite articulate, but I knew that it had to do with my spirituality
Right.
or my lack thereof. And so he nourished me and he kept giving me books to read and he took me to this place and that place and we would listen to music and just walk the city and then one day we were at the Shakespeare and Company bookstore by the Seine, very famous bookstore, and we went there a lot. And one particular day he was going along, and he pulls down a book. He says, "Here, Martin, I think that this will speak to where you are now." I said, "Okay, fine." It was Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, and I read it. It was 1,000 pages, and I couldn't put it down on the set at night when it took me a week or so to read it to finish it, and it struck such a deep chord in me. It brought to the surface what I needed to do, and that was to rejoin my faith,
Yep.
my my childhood faith, and the Catholicism. And I wanted to come back, but I didn't want to come back to piety or fear, anxiety of being condemned, But I wanted to come back to the social justice of the Church of Pope John the 23rd, of Mother Teresa and Dan Berrigan, and peace activism and social justice work. And so that's what I did. I came back in Paris in 1981, May
And,
1st.
and essentially define your philosophy the last 45 years of your
Yeah,
life, safe to
yeah,
say,
pretty
right?
much. I didn't realize how much I missed the community. As I say, we need community. It's the
Yeah,
only way we can really function, that we begin to know ourselves is in community. Can't do
right.
much on your own. But in community, you can find yourself and become your true self. And yeah, that's what I tried to do. And so it meant the world to me. And I got Terry to thank for leading me back to through that door and accepting that beautiful grace, because it is a great form of grace, and I cherish it. Yeah.
I can't think of perhaps a more different experience than the Terry Malick Badlands experience than Apocalypse Now, which is maybe the most storied production of any film. I mean, there are obviously Hearts of Darkness was made, books have been written. We know we've heard a lot of stories about the making of it. We know what you went through, the heart attack and true breakdown. I mean, what's your relationship to seeing some of that footage? I mean, like the footage of you, that iconic scene in the beginning of the film, the mirror breaking the glass. I mean, you're going through it. You are breaking the mirror. We're seeing a man break down. I'm seeing you at your almost fall apart. What's it like for you to look back at that and actually see that?
It's not very comforting. I remember, gosh, I remember George Hickenlooper
Yeah,
was the director of the documentary of a filmmaker's Apocalypse.
yeah,
And he asked me for an interview. All the lads were interviewed, but we had not seen the film yet, and we had not seen the documentary that he was making. He just told us he would appreciate us doing an interview and so forth. I didn't realize how powerful that documentary was, but it told the true story. And that particular day was my 36th birthday, and
right.
I was wildly out of control with alcohol and going through a very deep emotional catharsis, and I was out of control. And I remember drinking all day, and it was night when we got to that scene. And the scene was no actual scene. There wasn't any
Right.
dialogue for that. He'd rewritten the whole opening. And so we were improvising a lot of that. And so Francis really wanted to call it a wrap. And I said, well, let's keep going here. Something might happen. It sure as hell
Something
did.
happened.
Yeah.
Something.
I was always embarrassed by it, of course. I never saw it until it was in the film. I couldn't. He wanted me to see it when the Russians came back from Rome a few weeks later, and I said, no, no, I don't have any. He said, well, it may be in the film. I said, well, that's your choice. I can't. I couldn't bear to watch it. No, I never wanted to watch it. I knew I kind of had a pretty good idea of what I'd done. I wasn't very proud of it.
It's
I was out.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think you were just 36 then, and like you. I mean, your
Yeah.
life could have ended. I mean, like I
Yeah.
mean, it truly, you were on the brink, and to
Yeah.
see all the life that was to come after, what
Yeah.
a gift. And what, I mean, yeah, just, I don't know, it's
Yeah.
just mind-boggling.
Yeah,
um
but I'll tell you this: when I saw it, George Hickenlooper, God rest him, sent me a copy of that documentary before it was released, Hearts of Darkness, and he said, "I want you to look at this and tell me if there's anything you want cut, and I'll be glad to consider it." I said, "Okay." So I watched it with a friend who did not know me then, only knew me now, and said, "Oh my God, how are you going to live with this?" And I said, that's who I was.
right,
That's not who I am.
right.
And so I had to let it go. But I remember when the film premiered in the summer of 1979 at Cannes, that scene was not in the
Oh,
film.
really? Oh,
It was not in the film, but it played, and he won the Palme d'Or, or at least he and another film
Yeah.
were tied for the Palme d'Or. But no, that film was not in it. He put it back in when the film opened in the States, and I didn't
Yeah.
know it. And I made sure that when the film opened, I wasn't available for publicity or anything. I was very, very intimidated by it, very shy about it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of hid away. I got a job and I made sure I was as far away as possible. I was on board the USS Nimitz doing a film called The Final Countdown. And for all
Right.
intents and purposes, it was that for me.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I was at sea for a little while. I was aboard the aircraft carrier while it was in port at Norfolk for a couple of months. And then we went out to sea to do
Right.
some filming, and they brought all the planes on board, and that was an experience. So we were at sea for a couple of weeks. At any rate, while I was away, the film opened, and I was just as happy not to be around. But then a few weeks later, they asked me to do some publicity over in New York. Would I do it? And I said, yeah, okay. Remember the film when it opened, it did not get very good reviews. It got okay reviews, but there was such an anticipation. And people were sort of, oh, the ending, this and that was that. But, Vietnam veterans started seeing the film and saying, if you want to know what it was like, that's the closest film that's ever gotten it. And they really pumped up the film with their
Sure.
experiences. And so they're the ones that made it happen. And I remember going to see the film in New York. It was playing at that big theater where it opened. It had been there sold out for 6 or 8 weeks. I don't remember, but and I didn't want to see it alone, so I called my friend John Crane, a kid I grew up with, who was my best man, and we were in high school together, and yeah, and so he took me to see it, and I remember sitting in the middle of the audience. Nobody knew had recognized me. Why should they? And when that scene came on, I was so I didn't expect it because I
Yeah.
knew it was not in the film in Cannes, so I thought it won't be in the film now, and there it was. I thought, oh Jesus, and I sat through it. But the scene that got me, that I really broke down watching, was the attack on the village with Bobby Duvall.
Yeah.
A brilliant performance, but that attack just it still gets me. That the ride of the Valkyries and coming in, and they're so brilliantly filmed uh, and enacted. It's so real and devastating, and yet it was played on some other level that you could only do in a movie.
Yeah.
And Francis did it, and it was one of the great, still is considered one of the great war movies, if you will. Though
Movies, period, I would say. Yeah.
I've had an equal number of young men and women tell me, some saying that that film inspired them to go into the military, and an equal number that said that film kept me out of
I can
joining the
imagine.
military.
Totally.
So go
Totally.
however you want to see it.
It's always been a treat also to see you collaborate with your children, whether being directed by Emilio or acting with Charlie. I mean, I think back, you in Wall Street, you and Charlie, the stuff between you two in that, it feels like you're acting, but there's also another level. You're going through something. There's a bit of your own. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what you guys were going through at the time, but there's
You got that, huh?
yeah, there's something there, and it
Yeah,
comes through the film.
yeah,
Yeah.
Charlie was responsible for my doing the part. He pitched me uh, in no uncertain terms to Oliver, and of course, I said I'd be delighted, and Oliver was gracious enough to give me the part, and I got to work with Charlie again. Um, yeah, it's a very special film.
Yeah.
He's terrific in it, and it still holds up.
Oh yeah.
It's still relevant, and they're all absolutely brilliant. And yeah, and the scenes with Charlie are personal. As I always say, if art is not personal, it's impersonal, and who cares? So yeah, I was very proud of that, and I love playing any
A union leader,
union hero.
yeah,
Yeah, I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That 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 got me.
Uh, a couple more I want to hit. I know we're taking up a lot of your time, but these stories are amazing. So if you indulge me, a couple more. We haven't even talked West Wing, but is there, when you think of West Wing, it's that Aaron Sorkin, brilliant dialogue. You have such meaty material there. Is there a speech, a line that speaks to you to this day from West Wing? I know it's a lot of material, but is there one in particular?
My very first line, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have false gods before me. That was my entrance. You
It's a
know,
good
they
entrance.
were, they were in there arguing about what is the first commandment, and I made my entrance. And with that line, I mean, when I was offered that show, it was for tops maybe 4 or 5 episodes
Right.
the first season. That was it. And one of the things I had to sign off on was that I would not play the president in anything else while the West Wing was on the air. What are the chances? But so I read the pilot and I thought, oh my God, this is absolutely brilliant, and I couldn't wait to get to it. I only had one scene. Well, the closing scene, maybe two scenes, but that was it. And I loved doing it. And I thought two things occurred to me. One, when they see the pilot, they're going to want to come back to me. I would hope to say who works in that office, because everybody knows what that office is.
Right.
Who's in charge in that office, and that's what happened. So they came back to me and gave me an opportunity to be part of the whole cast, because originally it was only about the staff. There was
Right.
no first lady, there was no first family. The president would appear every maybe fourth or fifth episode, throughout the series. And so I was delighted. I had two requests. One was that he be Catholic, and the reason was because I wanted this president to make all his decisions, both public and private, political and non-political, but all of his actions would fall in a moral frame of reference. And the closest thing I could get to that was a practicing Catholic. And they said, absolutely, sure. And that he had to be a Democrat was a foregone conclusion. However, I've said, as I think I mentioned to you, if he had been a Republican, but Aaron Sorkin wrote him, I would have said, of course. And the other thing, I wanted the Notre Dame degree, because since I was a boy, I loved Notre Dame, and so many of my heroes came out of Notre Dame, and so I just wanted to celebrate that great institution. And they said, of course.
That's using
And,
your leverage, your stature for good to get those two requests in there.
and that's all I asked for.
Hey,
When I started, though, it's interesting because when I started, I would negotiate sometimes with Aaron on some of the dialogue. Can you imagine how stupid I was? And I would say, well, Aaron, here in this thing, I don't really care. I would never say it like that. Aaron would say, well, you should, I see it that way, but if you don't, oh, okay, fine. And we would negotiate, and I would try to hew him down until I got it my way. And then I discovered, and soon enough, thank God, that when I did it my way, it was okay. It was Martin. When I did it Aaron's way, it was Bartlett. And
Right.
that's what I came to. And I stayed there. And I never argued with him again. Even though there were two incidents over the years. One, in the stage direction, he said, in the stage direction, he said, Bartlett pounds his head on the desk. I said, no, there's no way I could possibly do that. And yet, when I was playing the scene, I couldn't wait to pound my head on the on the desk. And the second one was when I saw MS in the script. I thought it was my initials. It was muscular dystrophy, or
Right.
what is it? The
Multiple
disease,
sclerosis. Yeah, yeah.
multiple sclerosis. Yes. And so I didn't see that coming. They were trying to tell me something. I wasn't sure.
I'm
But
somewhat
yeah,
surprised that, I mean, there's been rumblings over the last few years. I mean, I'm sure Sorkin, they've tried to convince to write some kind of follow-up. On your end, has it come close? Have you heard something like we're about to do something and it just didn't happen? No.
no, Sorkin is like Dylan, he never looks back.
Right.
He's always
Fair enough.
always going forward.
Fair enough.
That's his work in the past, of course, is his brilliant foundation that allows him to launch and to go into new and
Yeah.
more personal places. But no, if he had thought about it, he never shared it with me or any of the lads that I know of. No, Yeah, because you can see reruns of it. They're relevant today, of course.
They
But
mean something different today
yeah,
to us,
yeah,
don't they?
very
They
much
really,
so. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Did
So
you
Aaron is like
go?
this. He's one of those geniuses. He's like Terrence Malick. They come along so rare, and they make their presence known so profoundly.
Yeah,
And we're not the same. They see through things. They don't reflect much. They absorb, and they see through, and they take us with them.
yeah,
They don't wait around. I remember when we were doing the first season of the West Wing, I thought, how is this show going to survive? We're so lucky to have this magnificent material, but how long can we possibly stay on the air and sell insurance and cars
right.
and products? Who knew? A Democratic Catholic president, very liberal guy with this administration. Wow, I think we could still be on the air if they wanted to go on. But it was Aaron Sorkin primarily, and there were some guys in that room, and specifically Lawrence O'Donnell,
Yep.
who brought all his experience from his work in the Senate. And so, when anything about the Senate or the House or anything in the White House, it was coming from experience. And we had so many people from the administration, Bill Clinton's administration, that started us off. And so many stories that went back to Eisenhower that they got and found people to tell the stories, and then they fused them into Bartlett. And one of them is one of my favorites, which was when the kid from Brooklyn during the Depression wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, and it didn't arrive at the White House until Jimmy Carter was president. And that's that story you see that Charlie finds this letter, and it's this young boy in Brooklyn, and so we bring the father into the Oval Office to meet him. It's a very moving scene. But that actually happened from the Roosevelt era to Jimmy Carter. And so there were stories like that throughout the seven seasons that were based on real stories, real people, and couched in West Wing dialogue and episodes.
Can
Can I bring up two more and then I'll let you go, sir?
Yeah, for sure.
They're two very different kind of things in different realms, but look, for comic book fans, you're Uncle Ben. That's very meaningful.
that's talk about iconic. Did you realize how iconic Uncle Ben is to generations of young men and women?
I didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue. I don't see many of the big so-called tent films. I didn't have a clue. I'd never seen Spider-Man. I never saw Superman. Forgive me. I saw Star Wars about 6 or 8 years ago. I like drama and, actors, doing play. The fantasy thing that never kind of made a dent in me. But no, gosh, a couple of years ago, I was giving the commencement speech at a university here in Los Angeles, and the guy that introduced me very graciously talked about all the things you're talking about, the West Wing and Badlands and Apocalypse Now. And it wasn't until he got to Spider-Man that the audience laughed and applauded. Uncle Ben, it's oh my God! I thought, what kind of universe are we living in?
It's the coin of the realm right now, and it means a lot to
Okay.
people.
Yeah.
It's
But I mean, that's a again trading on the series of these moral authority figures.
Yeah.
It's perfect for you, and you don't get the iconic line, but it's still you don't get the with great power comes great responsibility. But
Oh, I said it.
do
I
you,
said it. Yeah, I voiced it over after I've been
oh, you're right
murdered.
in the voiceover towards the end.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
you're right.
I got to voice it over. You didn't see me, but you heard me say it.
I wanted to see you, I
You
guess.
weren't paying attention.
I've lost my nerd cred. Martin, oh no. But you're right. I remember, of course. So you're right. You're right. The last one I want to
Sorry,
mention.
Josh.
No,
Nothing
no,
personal.
it's okay. It's okay. The last one I want to mention, um, Martin Scorsese, Departed. One of the most shocking deaths I've ever seen in a film. I mean, that's a gut punch. That
Yeah.
that character's the way he shoots it, just it's
Yeah.
but what a treat to go up against Leo to
I was
Marty.
disappointed that kind of cut me out of a possible part two.
Well, they didn't make it for anybody, so no worries there.
But I mean, that must be. I mean, does that live up to the hype? I mean, Marty's a contemporary. I would think your paths crossed over the years.
No, I met him years ago, but I never. I hope that all the directors that I've worked with, including Francis and Terrence Malick, will appreciate me when I say this. If I had a choice to work with another director that I've worked with before, without question, it would be Marty Scorsese. I adored him, and the chief reason was that I never worked with a director that loved actors. I mean, adored them, like Marty Scorsese on the set. It was just so clear. All the he was working, in that film, particularly talking about The Departed, some of the biggest young stars in the world, and they adored him, and it was a mutual admiration society, and they were all so kind and generous and giving, and the set was so fun despite the horrible actions that were being done and the violence. But it's the first time I worked with Jack Nicholson, and he was so generous and sweet to all the players,
Yeah.
and that was the thing about it was an acting film. Do you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
whole film depended on performances. And so you had these young guys, all these young buffaloes with these big careers were doing some of their best work. And then you had one of the great cinematic stars in the world for 50 years, Jack Nicholson, and he threw us all together, and he made this, I think it's extraordinary film.
Yeah.
And but working, another thing about Martin was that he was so easy to trap in a joke. I remember one time I was standing behind him when a scene was going on with some of the lads I wasn't involved in, and he said, "Okay, cut." And he walks up to the front. He said, "Oh no, that was very good. And that was very good." And I said, "Hey, why don't you tell him what you said, man? You said they were all stunk. It was the worst scene." No, 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 I didn't say that. Don't be. And everyone is laughing because you can. That's the way he was so vulnerable. He was so sweet. You could catch him. He would believe you. But yeah, if that was a once in a lifetime experience, and he let me put Notre Dame in the film and make the sign of the cross as often as I could, and I adored him. Yeah,
There's a new.
and
Yeah.
just for the record, it's the only film he's won the Academy
I
Award for
know.
Best Direction. So I'm very proud to have been in, despite all of the great films he's done with all of the great actors.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be a small part,
He
but
needed he
nonetheless.
needed the Martin Sheen moment to put him over the edge.
Are
That's what
you listening, Marty? Hey,
I like that you're still looking for work. You're still looking for jobs. You're good, Martin. You're greedy. You've done everything. Um, no, I mean, look, I don't even know what to say. This is like, we hit the greatest hits. You have over like 250 TV and film credits. So we could have done this for 10 hours. I appreciate the hour you spent with me today because your work, first I'll say this, your work is very meaningful to me, but honestly, the way you have walked the walk and talked the talk in your life and how you carry yourself as somebody that stands up for the right causes, it's you set the bar high for the rest of us, and I speak for many that say we admire you on so many levels. So for that, you have my thanks, and I'll remind folks again, Martin Sheen podcast. It's evergreen, as we've been reminded. You don't need to just tune in 1 week. It's there for you always, wherever you get your podcasts.
oh,
Mark,
Josh,
thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. And thank you for your support of our podcast and for, being a part of this whole journey because you are a large part of it, as you know. And thanks to your interview with Emilio, we were introduced to you, and we're eternally grateful. And the only thing that's surprising about this interview is that I didn't realize how young you were. Honest to God, I thought with your experience and with your knowledge, he has to be an old guy. And I had no idea. No one told me you were as young as you are.
It's all the filters. It's don't worry, I'm an old man.
Oh, well, I know about that. Look at this light went asunder here, right in the middle of one of my great stories. Why, I ought to.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully we'll meet in person one of these days. I appreciate
I
it.
would like that. Thank you so much. I look forward to it. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks. Same here.
And so ends another edition of Happy, Sad, Confused. Remember to review, rate, and subscribe to this show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm a big podcast person. I'm Daisy Ridley, and I definitely wasn't pressured to do this by Josh.